What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to learn how to frame notch a G-body. Alright, for those of you who follow John Doc on YouTube, we have brown sugar in the shop today, and John asked me to help him out with something on this car. He's got it for sale, and he was having a problem with the tires rubbing the frame. You can see here, and it rubbed up through here, and on the back side too. So what we can do today to make this work is actually notch a section of frame out, and we've got a UMI frame notch kit that we're going to put in it for John. Now this is kind of a complex process. You're cutting the frame of a car, so experienced fabricator, good equipment is definitely required to do this job. But this video is not going to be terribly long. I'm going to time lapse some of the cutting and welding back in. But just to give you guys an idea, in the fender well here, the plates come extra long, so they'll overhang here and overhang way back here. So it's a cut to fit kit, even though it's close. So this car's got a 12 bolt in it, and it has double beadlock wheels. So to gain the tire clearance that we need, notch the frame, and then we're going to massage the inner wheel well here. He doesn't want to mini tub it, which is fine because you can fit a 275 and a double beadlock in this car with just a frame notch and massaging the inner fender. So the first step is we have to hold these plates up and see about where we need to cut. So you can see, like I said, the plate overhangs on both sides. So we're just gonna kind of guess where we need to cut. Now I know this is the biggest tire he's ever gonna run on this car, so I don't need to go huge as far as forward and backwards. But what I do need to do is at the top of the frame here, we're going to take about 1 inch out. So I'm actually going to use the plasma cutter because I think it's going to be the fastest way to do it. I'm about to find out. So what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and scribe my lines, fire up the plasma cutter, and I'm going to start cutting stuff apart. Now for those of you who don't have a plasma cutter, you can definitely do this with a cutoff wheel. It just takes a lot longer, and I am all about doing stuff fast. So I'm gonna lift the car up and then we're gonna cut the bottom side. On the bottom side of the frame, you can see where the two halves are welded together. And what I'm gonna do is come right to the inside of where they're welded together and just follow that line all the way down. That should give me plenty of room for tire clearance. Alright, so after you're done cutting, here's what you're left with. Of course, with a plasma cutter, I'm going to have to come in here and clean up the edges, but that's fine because I'm going to have to trim the frame to fit the notch. But there's the piece cut out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut the other side real quick. I won't video that. I'll only show you guys the one side. And then we'll start grinding and trimming, making everything fit. Alright, now that we have the corners on both sides squared off, what I'm going to do is come in here and clean up where I plasma cut real quick, just with a heavy duty grinder to smooth everything out. And then I'm going to start laying the piece in here and marking where I need to cut my frame notch piece from UMI. So you can see we got all of our edges cleaned up. Now the next step is to get the plate back in here and start trimming the plate to fit our frame that's now been modified. So they make these big on all edges. And what I want to do is I actually want to recess it into the frame. So I'm going to cut it to fit inside. That way up here, instead of having to try to weld across the top, I can weld across the front. I don't know if that's going to be easy or hard yet. So I'm going to take a quick lunch break and change clothes because I'm now covered in metal shavings, and hopefully I won't have to do much more grinding out here today. So I'm going to take a break real quick, but I'll be right back with you guys. All right, we're back. Showered, cleaned up a little bit, fed tuna fish and jalapeno poppers. It's pretty good. Anyway, back to G-body. So like I said, we have all this cleaned up, kind of ready to go. Now what I'm going to do is attempt to mount the camera to something so that I can use both my hands to hold this piece up here, show you guys what we're going to do. So here is our notch plate. You can see we're still not real good fitting in here. So what I need to do is start trimming away this plate until it fits up inside here. So what I'm going to do first is I'll come over here and cut this down. Might actually cut it like this, and then I'll plate this backside with one of the plates they provide. In the front, we're pretty close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the back to fit first, which is going to take a little bit of work, and then we'll move our way forward. All right, so I have the one side trimmed, and I laid it on top of the other side. You can kind of see how much I had to trim off top and bottom. It wasn't bad, but the one that I've already trimmed fits good on both sides, so I'm going to go ahead and mark the bottom one and trim it the same. Okay, now that we have both of our plates trimmed, we can clamp this side in the car. I've got some big vice grips that I'll put on it, and getting this perfectly flat is kind of a challenge to match up to that plate. But you want to get it real close. That way, you know, if you got a little bit of a gap, you can squeeze it all the way down, tighten it up, and weld it in. So let's get going. So we're starting to tack the plate in here. I try to work around so that I don't get it hot and warp it, which in this case, since we're clamping it, isn't really important. But I still like moving back and forth just to make sure that it gets a chance to cool before I weld a hot spot again. So I'm gonna get the top side tacked. Bottom side's already got a few on it. And then I'm gonna weld this entire thing in. So now this side is completely welded, top and bottom. I still have to make the plates for the back and for the front. But you can see how much of a notch there is there and a lot in the back. So what I'm going to do now is weld the other side in, then I'll come back over here and we'll make the plates. Alright, so passenger side is welded in, and driver side is welded in. Now what I need to do is make the plates, which is kind of hard to see, for the rear and the front. And basically all I'm going to do is take the plates that they sent here, which I couldn't figure out why they were cut this way. I was kind of confused by it, but what I'm going to do is use these to make the box plates on the end. So what I'll do is I'll hold it up here, trace the back side, and then I'll cut it a little short so that it will fit inside the frame here, and then I'll weld them in front and rear. Here are my 4 plates. Go up in here and cap the ends. So I'm going to weld these in real quick. I don't think you guys need another time lapse of me welding, but as soon as they're in, I will show you the finished product. Okay, so this is going to do it for the G-body frame notch. Both sides are done. And if I had to guess where the tire comes through, I gained about 1.5 inches of clearance, which should be plenty for a 275 drag radial, which is what's going to go on this car. Now, I am going to do a little bit extra to this car, and I'm not going to do a step-by-step on it, but I'll give you the basic rundown. G-Body West called it a G-Box, which basically helps tie the rear of the frame, which is now weak, to the front of the frame, in between the frame rails. So I'll lift the car up and show you what I'm going to do. So basically the frame notch ends here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a bar from frame rail to frame rail, and then I'm going to bring 2 bars up and tie in to this panel where the upper control arms mount. So hopefully I have enough tubing to do this, but basically what that's going to do is just tie the structure back together. So when these cars launch real hard, they have a tendency to twist, and now that the rear of the frame rail isn't supported as well, you want to make sure that you add a little bit of support if you plan on drag racing, if you make a lot of torque. So I'm going to cut up some tube real quick, slam it in here, and I'll show you the finished product here in a minute. All right, so I've got some metal shoved up here to protect that fuel line. But here is your G-brace, I guess you would call it. So in between both frame rails and then up to where the upper control arms mount. And the reason I did it straight like that is to get as much clearance as I could around the upper control arm, because when the suspension compresses, the upper control arm is going to get close to that brace. So just wanted to make sure that I had enough room. And that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about notching your G-body, be sure that you comment below. I try to answer all the questions that get put in there. And don't forget, there is a link in the description below for High PSI TV merchandise. Help support the brand, help support the channel. I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you next time.